Hello and welcome to today's webinar on genealogical resources for Pennsylvania research. My name is Ginevra Morse. I'm the Director of Education and Online Programs at the New England Historic Genealogical Society. I'll be moderating today's event. NEHGS is a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history and are very pleased to offer this webinar today for our members and friends around the world. Giving today's presentation is Ann Lawthers. Ann assists NEHGS library visitors, both on-site and online, with their family history research. She is a graduate of Wellesley College and the Harvard School of Public Health, and she has completed the Boston University Certificate in Genealogical Research program. She has conducted genealogical projects as an independent researcher, and Ann's areas of expertise include Massachusetts, Vermont, the Mid-Atlantic, including, of course, Pennsylvania, Canada, Ireland, and migration patterns. So over the next 45 minutes, Ann will review how to get started in Pennsylvania research, discuss how the patterns of settlement in the state influence our work as genealogists, and she'll conclude by highlighting some of the known and less well-known Pennsylvania sources for family historians. At any time during the presentation, please feel free to write a question in the questions panel to the right of your screen, and Ann will answer as many as she can in the time provided. There is no handout for today's presentation, but there is a fantastic subject guide on our website, AmericanAncestors.org, that provides links and full bibliographic references to many of the resources that we'll cover today, and that subject guide also provides additional information and research tips. You can also take screen captures using the camera icon in the upper right hand of your screen. That icon won't appear if you're viewing this full screen, so you may just need to resize that open window. We're also recording this event, and starting tomorrow, you can easily go back and review any of the content from the presentation. All right, so without further ado, I will turn things over to Ann.
Thank you, Ginevra. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak with you about genealogical research in Pennsylvania. I have a particular interest in Pennsylvania because one of my grandmothers is from Western Pennsylvania. The Homer family migrated to Mercer County in 1809 and is still there today. Okay, let's begin. How to get started in Pennsylvania research. I recommend that you start by asking yourself two questions. The first question, when did my ancestors arrive? Did they arrive during the colonial period, or was it after the Revolutionary War? Or did they arrive in the 20th century? The second question that you should ask yourself is, did my ancestors belong to a specific immigrant group? Were they Quakers, or perhaps Scots-Irish, or Mennonites, or members of another group? The answer to these two questions will guide you in your quest for information. The records that are available for researchers of the colonial period are very different from the records available to researchers of the 20th century. And the question about groups allows you to take advantage of a unique feature of Pennsylvania research, which is the abundance of special resources for different immigrant groups. Here at NEHGS, we have a couple of resources that can help you get started with your research. As Ginevra mentioned, we have the online Pennsylvania Genealogy Subject Guide. From our homepage, click on the blue Education button, which I'm going to highlight in just a moment. Dun, da, 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 there you go. So you will click on the blue Education button at the top of the screen, select Learning Resources from the drop-down box to find the complete listing of subject guides. And of course, you'll want to click on Pennsylvania Genealogy. In addition, we have a short 4-page portable genealogist guide to Pennsylvania research, which highlights the most effective research strategies for Pennsylvania and presents the key resources. A third guide, which you can find in many libraries, is published by the National Genealogical Society as part of their Research in the States series. This book includes suggestions for all of the material that you will find in our subject guide and portable genealogist, as well as additional pieces of information. So a tip. As you are getting started, in addition to consulting the guides that I've just mentioned, it would also behoove you to consult the digital and other offerings of the Pennsylvania Archives. The Pennsylvania Archives, found online at the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission, maintains an extensive set of resources online. This screenshot shows some of their online resources, including genealogically valuable death and birth indices. You'll see them down here in this list. Land records, military records, and much more. To get to this page, all you have to do is type Pennsylvania Archives online into your browser, and the link to this page should be among the top 2 or 3 hits. In addition to extensive online resources, the Pennsylvania Published Archive series deserves a special mention. This resource includes volumes of valuable genealogical material. There are 10 archive series which were published over about 110 years period under several different authors. This slide highlights the series that are of keen interest to genealogists. For example, Series 2 includes early marriage records and some early church records. The third series is a bonanza of tax records and also has early land records that establish your ancestor in a specific time and place. The 5th and 6th series are mostly Revolutionary War records, although you will find some War of 1812 materials in these volumes. A few church records are included in volumes in the series 5 and 6. The 7th series is an every name index to the 6th series. Now, in order to access the published Pennsylvania Archive series, you can do it in one of 3 ways. The complete 10 series set is searchable and available on fold3.com, which is a subscription site. The genealogically important series, as shown on this slide, are available at familysearch.org, which is a free website, and ancestry.com, which is a subscription site. Now, since there are 10 series and many, many volumes in the archive series, you may decide that you need a published finding aid to provide a roadmap to the archive series. The one that I'm highlighting here by Christine Crawford Oppenheimer is aptly titled Lost in Pennsylvania. Let's move on now to the history of settlement in Pennsylvania. Understanding the factors that influenced settlement will help you, as a researcher, know where to look for that elusive record. You will see that the county boundaries in Pennsylvania were quite fluid up until the mid-19th century. You will also see that specific ethnic and religious groups tended to settle in very specific regions of the state. Pennsylvania takes its name from the Englishman William Penn, who received a charter for land from King Charles II in 1682. The Swedish, Finnish, and Dutch had already staked claims on Pennsylvania, but the development of the colony was most heavily influenced by Penn. Penn published a set of governing principles for the colony. These principles included religious tolerance and a non-adversarial relationship with the Native Americans that was to be based on shared land and fair trade. These principles really shaped the social and economic environment of the colony. Although Penn spent less than 5 years all told on Pennsylvania soil, his system of governance has endured for generations and produced the records that we genealogists now treasure, especially the system for purchasing and distributing land. Now, geography also played a big part in the settlement of Pennsylvania. Settlement began here on the Delaware River, as you will see by the red arrow, and moved in a fairly ordered pattern west as settlers sought fertile valleys. The Great Valley, which is here with the red arrow, known as the Cumberland Valley in Pennsylvania, actually stretches from Alabama to Quebec. It's a giant trough of low-lying valleys on the eastern edge of the Appalachian mountain chain and is used for north-south travel and has been used for north-south travel since prehistoric times. Several major migration paths follow the valley, and one of them was actually called the Great Valley Road. The Appalachian Mountains are known as the Allegheny Mountains in Pennsylvania, and they do present a formidable barrier to westward movement. If you take a close look at the map of Pennsylvania, you can see how the natural geography influenced the county boundaries. So you can see, I'm going to highlight with the arrow a couple of county lines. You'll see that they follow the mountain ridges. Now, west of the Allegheny Mountains, you see the high Allegheny Plateau of western Pennsylvania. Not surprisingly, given the extensive mountain barrier in Pennsylvania, the plateau was first settled by people from Virginia and Maryland. So if your ancestors were in western Pennsylvania before the Revolution, your ancestors' records might be in one of those states. I mentioned that certain groups settled in very specific areas. This map shows where some of the earliest immigrants to Pennsylvania landed. The Swedes and the Finns, as mentioned earlier, were along the Delaware River, and in fact, they were there as early as 1614. They were followed by the Dutch, who arrived around 1630. Beginning in 1682, William Penn's principles of religious tolerance wooed settlers from war-torn areas of what is now known as Germany. These settlers came into the port of Philadelphia, which is approximately there, and first settled some of the areas here, but then ended up here. These settlers moved westward as they sought open farmland. Over time, many stayed in Pennsylvania, but some went west and then south along the Great Valley Road, which is approximately where the red arrow is, into Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina. The Scots-Irish began arriving about the same time as the earliest German settlers, but tended to move west more quickly. They were among the first to settle this parcel of land that is labeled 1736, but they didn't stay there long. They actually were among the first to cross the Allegheny Mountains. The presence of strong Native American tribes in the region presented a barrier to westward movements in addition to the barrier of the mountains. It wasn't until the conclusion of the conflict that we know as the French and Indian Wars that much of the western Pennsylvania land became available for purchase, as you will see by the dates of these purchases. In addition to substantial numbers of European settlers, residents from other colonies also shaped the Pennsylvania landscape. Starting with the lower left-hand corner of the map, Virginia claimed southwestern Pennsylvania for a time. The present border of West Virginia is from there to about there. So as mentioned earlier, if your ancestor was in southwestern Pennsylvania before the Revolution, their records may actually be in Virginia. Moving to the lower right-hand corner, Pennsylvania and Delaware disputed the land along the Delaware River for generations. The matter was not settled until 1769 with the separation of Delaware from Pennsylvania. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see an area that was disputed by Connecticut and Pennsylvania. Both colonies believed that their charters from King Charles II granted them the land in the Wyoming Valley, which is approximately where the red arrow is. Matters came to a head during the Revolutionary War and were settled when Connecticut received the Western Reserve lands in Ohio in exchange for their claim on the Pennsylvania land. And the Erie Triangle up here in the top left-hand corner was the last purchase and was completed to give Pennsylvania frontage onto Lake Erie. All in all, it took 110 years from Penn's charter to the Erie Triangle purchase for Pennsylvania to achieve its present shape. A tip: keep a county map of Pennsylvania handy as you do your research. Pennsylvania is a state where almost all the records you need are at the county level. That is birth, marriage, death, probate, and land you will find at the county level. In 1682, with the charter from King Charles, Pennsylvania started with 3 counties: Chester, Bucks, and Philadelphia. At the time of the Erie Triangle purchase in 1792, there were 21 counties. The Bucks, Philadelphia, and Chester are still down here in the southeastern portion, and you will see that the counties in the mid and western part of the state are quite large. So there were 21 counties in 1792. It wasn't until 1878 that the last county was formed to give a total of 67 counties. Your ancestor may have stayed in the same spot for generation, but been part of 3 or 4 different counties. The URL you see at the bottom of your screen shows the website where the maps depicting the evolution of counties may be found, mapofus.org. I use this particular website for all states I research in, not just Pennsylvania. Another handy tip is that settlers of the colonial period often belonged to a specific identified group. This is helpful because you can often find published compilations of group-specific records. Let's review some of the major groups that arrived in the colonial period. As mentioned earlier, the Swedish and the Finnish were the earliest settlers, and established the fort of New Sweden in 1638. The Dutch conquered Sweden in 1655 and in turn were overpowered by the English in 1674. The largest group of non-English speaking immigrants before 1720 came from the German-speaking principalities along the Rhine River and from Switzerland. They were largely Anabaptists, that is, Mennonites, Amish, Dunkards, who believed that Christians should follow the simple, peaceful ways of the first apostles. As German immigration grew, many Lutheran sects arrived on Pennsylvania's shores. Many German settlers stayed primarily in southeastern Pennsylvania, moving as far west as the Cumberland Valley, or migrating to the southern states. The Scots-Irish, principally from Northern Ireland, began arriving around 1709. The earliest Welsh settlers were Quakers and occupied an area just west of Philadelphia known as the Welsh Tract. Let's talk a little bit more about Quaker resources. This group deserves special mention given the enormous influence that they wielded on shaping of the colony of Pennsylvania. The Society of Friends was founded in 1647, but the members soon experienced persecution. By 1682, when King Charles granted William Penn land in Pennsylvania, many were ready to leave England's shores. Let's talk about specific resources. One of the most important ones will be William Wade Hinshaw's Encyclopedia of American Quaker Genealogy. Of course, you'll want to take a look at the U.S. Quaker meeting records at Ancestry. And if you are ever in the Philadelphia area, you may want to pay a visit to Swarthmore's Friends Historical Library. Now, on our website at AmericanAncestors.org, we do have a subject guide devoted to Quaker research. Let's talk about finding your Pennsylvania German ancestors. The earliest German ancestors were Quakers and Mennonites from the Crefeld region of Westphalia, but the major immigration really got underway in 1709. These immigrants established farms in Chester, Bucks, Montgomery County along the coastal plain. There are a number of very useful researchers available to individuals who are researching ancestors among the Pennsylvania Dutch. In addition to our Pennsylvania guide, we have a specific guide for Pennsylvania German research. Second, I would like to call your attention to the works by Annette Burgert, Henry Jones, and William Parsons. These books include many lists of immigrants from the Palatinate and other regions of Germany. Mennonite, Amish, and Brethren religious groups are offshoots of what is known as the Anabaptist movement. Anabaptist sects believe in adult baptism, separation of church and state, and nonviolence. The two resources that I would recommend to those of you with Mennonite or Brethren or Dunkard ancestors are the Mennonite Encyclopedia, it's 5 volumes, and the Brethren Encyclopedia, which is 3 volumes. The Scots-Irish, like other groups of American immigrants, came to the New World to escape economic and religious hardships. They arrived in Philadelphia, but quickly found that the best farmland in southeastern Pennsylvania had already been claimed by the Germans. So the Scots-Irish went west, first to Lancaster County, and then even further west to the Great Valley in front of the Allegheny Mountains. Our Pennsylvania guide suggests numerous books focusing on the Scots-Irish in Pennsylvania. Some of the major authors that you will be looking for are Wayland Dunaway, Charles Hanna, and Warren Hofstra. Now, the Welsh also formed a significant group that came to Pennsylvania. The earliest Welsh settlers were over here on the lower right-hand corner of your screen in the Philadelphia area. However, after the Revolutionary War, large groups of Welsh settlers who were coal miners came to Pennsylvania. This particular map shows where the coal deposits are located in Pennsylvania, and you will see that up here, this particular coal deposit is where you will find one group of Welsh settlers. And then later on, as coal was mined in the Pittsburgh area and then led to iron and later steel production, many Welsh settlers were in the western part of the state. So if you have Welsh ancestors, you're going to be looking at counties that are either in the northeast or the southwest of the state. The next section of the webinar covers the mainstays of genealogical records that are available for Pennsylvania, with an emphasis on a couple of unique features of Pennsylvania research. A caution, however, this is an overview. This is not an exhaustive list of resources for Pennsylvania research. First, let's talk about census records. Census records are the backbone of much of what we do for 19th and 20th century genealogical research. These essential records help establish a person's presence in a particular place at a particular time. All genealogists are familiar with U.S. federal census records, which span from 1790 to 1940. At least the online versions do. There have been no record losses for Pennsylvania on the federal census, except for, of course, 1890. This is in contrast to some of the states nearby, such as New Jersey, which is missing the very earliest censuses. A less familiar resource that I would recommend is the Pennsylvania Septennial Census, which was conducted every 7 years beginning in 1779 for tax and representation purposes. This database can be found at Ancestry. Okay, with the exception of the 1779 and 1786 Pennsylvania census, there are no federal censuses of colonial Pennsylvania. So what is a researcher to do? You consult tax lists. Prior to the first federal census, many counties kept lists of property owners for purposes of taxation. Now, property included not only real estate, but it also included livestock. Ancestry has two searchable databases of tax lists, but I'd like again to call your attention to the published Pennsylvania Archives series, particularly the Series 3. This is a gold mine of county tax information, and you can find it at Fold 3 or in your local library. So we've covered census and tax records. Let's talk about vital records. Unlike the Puritans of Massachusetts, the early ruling groups of Pennsylvania did not bring the tradition of government vital record keeping with them from England. So basically what this means is that before 1852, there were no government-produced vital records, no town records, no county records, and certainly nothing at the state level. So before 1852, the only birth, marriage, and death records will be in churches or in larger cities such as Philadelphia. Between the brief time period of 1852 to 1854, the state briefly flirted with vital record keeping at the county level, but because compliance was so spotty, the effort was soon abandoned. And then for the next 30 years, 1855 to 1885, there were no civil records kept. And genealogical research must rely on church records or large city records. Beginning in 1885, counties began requiring the recording of marriages. And by the way, this continues to the present time. Counties are responsible for recording marriages. Beginning in 1893, counties began to record births and deaths as well as marriages, with the Orphans Court having responsibility for the recording of deaths. Finally, in 1906, we get statewide recording of births and deaths. Okay, where are you going to find the vital records? Well, Ancestry has a very robust collection of Pennsylvania records. Of particular note are the death certificates for 1906 to 1963. Not too many states have made their full death certificates available online and searchable. FamilySearch.org has civil and county marriages. Note that on the county marriages database, the year that the records start is the same as what I showed you on the previous slide, 1885, as the beginning of civil registration of marriages at the county level. This database, which Family Search calls Pennsylvania Civil Marriages, tantalizingly has the date of 1677 as when the records start. However, anything prior, there are only 2 counties included among the pre-1885 records in this database. One is for Bucks County. They have records from 1677 to 1686, and Lancaster County with records from 1757 to 1799. So in point of fact, county marriages really start 1885. A third source is the Pennsylvania Genealogical Magazine. This book compiles records from the magazine and spans from the mid-17th to the mid-19th century and covers all counties in the state. You should check out worldcat.org, which is the International Library Catalog, and your local library. 2 cities did begin vital record keeping before the state. Philadelphia began record keeping in 1803 for deaths and 1860 for births and marriages. Pittsburgh got on the bandwagon in 1870. You can find these city-specific vital records at FamilySearch.org. There are 3 databases for Philadelphia and 1 database for Pittsburgh. So your tip here is, given the lack of vital records prior to really modern times, the researcher needs to substitute church records for civil vital records. By 1750, there were at least 11 different religious denominations in Pennsylvania. Now, this can be confusing. On the other hand, many of these groups do have published compilations of records. The large number, 11, is directly attributable to the legacy of religious tolerance of William Penn. We've talked about some of these groups already, but to review, early religious groups included the Quaker, Baptist, mostly from the British Isles, Lutheran, Reformed, Mennonite, Moravian, Dunkard, all Anabaptists, Schwenkfelder, Calvinist, primarily German-speaking, Huguenot, French-speaking, and Presbyterian, Scots-Irish. After 1750, you will find other compilations of records for Methodist, Congregationalists, Roman Catholics, and Jewish records. So where do you start with church records? I would start with the FamilySearch.org card catalog. There are 106 Pennsylvania-specific church resources. This screen shows a portion of the catalog listing. Now, some of these are books, which you won't be able to get unless worldcat.org shows that you can get it from a local library or through interlibrary loan. But others of these resources are microfilms, which you can order from Salt Lake and have sent to your local family history center. And Family Search is increasingly making records available digitally so that you do not have to leave home. The Ancestry collection of church records, although it's titled Pennsylvania and New Jersey Church and Town Records, really focuses on Philadelphia and the eastern counties. Western counties are not well represented in this particular database. And of course, you have the U.S. Quaker meeting records from 1681 to 1935. But do not despair. There are other resources for church records. First, I would recommend checking the County Historical Society of the county where your ancestors lived. County historical societies, I think, are an underused resource. They often have special collections dedicated to the families, the early families who settled in a particular area. And they will often have church records that are not available elsewhere. I would also check worldcat.org for your county. This will tell you whether or not your county has produced a set of compiled church records. And finally, you may wish to check one of the repositories dedicated to the denomination of your ancestor, such as the Friends Historical Library at Swarthmore, the Lutherans Archives Center at Philadelphia, the Moravian Archives at the Moravian Historical Society, the Lancaster Mennonite Historical Society, the Presbyterian Historical Society in Philadelphia, and the Philadelphia Archdiocesan Historical Research Center. Let's now turn our attention to immigration records. Everyone wants a passenger list. For most of the United States, you are out of luck if your ancestor arrived before 1820. That's because the Act regulating passenger vessels was put into effect in 1820. This act required ship captains to file a manifest of all persons on board seeking admission to the country. Pennsylvania researchers get a break. Beginning in 1727, the Port of Philadelphia required passenger lists for all non-British passengers seeking entrance through the port. These lists typically include the name of the passengers and, unfortunately, zero information about them. As of 1820, the amount of information improved somewhat. You get the passenger's name, then you get age, gender, and occupation. It wasn't until 1906 that the detailed passenger lists that we have today became law. The post-1906 lists include information such as the last place of residence, contact within the U.S., as well as other information. Now, the next two slides show the stark difference in the amount of information that you will find on a passenger list depending on when your ancestor arrived. Okay, two early passenger lists. First one is from 1728, and it's a transcription that is included in Ralph Strasburger's book, Pennsylvania German Pioneers. It's a list of people. The other information that you find is you get the ship's name, the captain's name, the date of arrival, and here it says Palatines, which implies they are from Germany. However, in my research, I've noted that the majority of the passengers may have been from the Palatinate, but most of these passenger lists do include other people. So you may find individuals from the Netherlands or France. It pays to take a close look at the list and not assume that this is 100% correct about the origin of the individuals being brought over at that time. On the right-hand side is an image from, let's see, post-1820 ship's manifest, Port of Philadelphia. You see it includes the name, it includes the person's age, gender. In this case, the occupation field has been left blank, but it does say what country they are from. In this case, it's Great Britain, and where they are going. They're going to the United States. The next image is a Philadelphia passenger list from 1920. You can see just by looking at this slide that the amount of information has increased significantly. I'm not going to read all the columns, but I do want to point out a few of the highlights. Last permanent residence is something that can be very, very helpful. The name and complete address of the nearest relative in the country that the person is from, who paid for the passage, whether or not the person was ever in the United States before, who they're going to stay with, and much more information which can be very valuable as a genealogist. So what are we to make of this? The tip is then, if your ancestor was a non-British, keep in mind that British, and that includes Ireland and Scotland, that they are considered British for the time period. If your ancestor was non-British, German, French, Spanish, etc., and they arrived through the Port of Philadelphia between 1727 and 1819, there's a very good chance you will find them on a passenger list. Okay, let's talk about naturalization documents. As I'm sure you know, naturalization documents can be a very rich source of information about where your ancestor came from. During the colonial period, immigrants were often naturalized at the Port of Philadelphia. The naturalization process was quite brief and basically consisted of the immigrant giving up their allegiance to their former king and also any allegiance to the Pope, and swearing allegiance to the British king. This database, which is compiled from records in the Pennsylvania Archives Series 2, will show the individual's name, the location of naturalization, and a date. Very basic information, but it's better than nothing. Beginning in 1790, the naturalization process became multi-step. First, an individual had to file a declaration of intent. A petition requesting to be naturalized would follow 1 to 3 years later, culminating with a certificate. Ancestry has 2 databases for the post-1790 naturalizations. Let's move on then to probate records. When a person dies, the probate process is used to settle a person's debts and ensure the orderly transition of property. A probate packet may include a will, if the person left one, an inventory, administrative bonds, and other documents. For genealogists, the probate packet is critical to confirm relationships, especially to discover and confirm maiden names and to find lists of children. In Pennsylvania, probate has been recorded since 1682. The Register of Wills in each county maintains the wills, dockets, and administrations. The Orphans Court is responsible for supervising real estate divisions, auditing accounts, and guardianships of minor heirs. Probates have been recorded, as I said, since 1682, and complete records are available in most counties. Probate actions are taken in a locality. Any action that was taken in a locality before the current county is usually found in the records of the parent county. This is where the mapoftheus.org site comes in very handy. For the very earliest Pennsylvania ancestors, there are a few quirks. Most of the pre-1700 probates were filed in Philadelphia, irrespective of the county of residence. Family Search has a great collection. It's unindexed, meaning that you have to go through the images one by one, but they are organized by county. 3 million plus images. Ancestry has searchable databases, but not as complete as the Family Search. Other sources for probate. Many counties have compiled books of will abstracts, and you should check with your historical society or the worldcat.org. Let's talk about land. Land records are crucial for tracing your ancestors, particularly in the colonial period. Land was often passed from father to son and following the ownership of a specific plot of land may help you disentangle the relationship when other records are missing. Land is where genealogicals benefit from William Penn's legacy. Okay, let's talk about the process. Although the Pennsylvania land records are excellent, they can be a bit challenging to navigate. The Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission website describes the process of application, warrant, survey, return, and patent. And there are a couple of special categories that you may see or learn about with Pennsylvania land. These are all described at the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission, and I'm not going to go through them all, but I will highlight the first 3. Depreciation lands is where Revolutionary War soldiers would get a certificate to enable them to purchase land. Donation lands are what other states call bounty lands, and they are in the northwestern part of the state. And the east side, west side applications is a really unique and interesting set of land records. These were records because the colonial government realized around 1760 that there were squatters on the land, people who hadn't filed any paperwork and hadn't paid any fees. So in 1765, a process was set up to survey the land, register the land, and the squatter got clear title after they paid the fee. The other categories are described at the website at the bottom. Okay, I've alluded to this website. I would really highly recommend that you take a look at it if you're doing early land research, and Ancestry has a couple of websites as well. I'm now going to show you the land page from the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. This is what it looks like. It talks about the land process. This is where you can actually go and look at the warranty maps. I'm going to show you a warranty map. These are available for all Pennsylvania counties. They show who got the original warrant. In this case, it was a William Hall. The person that patented it, that got the first deed, on the other hand, was my ancestor, John Walker. Mr. William Hall sold his warrant to Mr. John Walker, and you will find these transactions recorded at the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission. So a tip, just remember that these wonderful records at the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission are for the very first patent only. Any subsequent transactions you will need to contact the county as shown on the next slide. This website gives you the most up-to-date information about the counties and their parent counties. So for example, Allegheny is the name of the county seat is Pittsburgh. When the county was created, this is helpful in terms of placing your ancestor and what the parent county was. Okay, I'd like to close then by once again reminding you that we have an online guide to Pennsylvania research at AmericanAncestors.org. This guide includes the full citations to the resources that I've mentioned, and you will find much more information about genealogical societies, migration routes, and much more. Now, back to you, Ginevra.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Anne. You certainly covered a lot of information. So let's pause here and tackle any questions that you may have. We do have about 10 minutes to answer a few questions. So go ahead and type it in the questions panel. And like I said, we'll answer as many as we can. Now, Sarah has a question. She says that she has a loyalist ancestor. Are you aware of certain communities, or, I mean, did loyalists kind of cluster in one location? And what additional resources might you suggest that she look into?
Okay, for loyalists, I would actually suggest something that's not Pennsylvania specific. There are a couple of books titled Loyalist Guides that will provide lists of loyalists and where they settled. Many loyalists, as you probably know, went north to Canada, and in Pennsylvania's case, there was no exception. You cross Lake Erie and boom, you're in Canada. So in terms of clustering and settlements, I am not aware of any specific ones in Pennsylvania, but I would recommend that you track down any one of the 3 or 4 books on loyalists in the American Revolution.
All right, thank you. Now, Renee is asking about the Pennsylvania Magazine of History and Biography, which I believe was published by the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. Do you know if there is a published index to that resource, and if it's published or if it might be online, or if you don't know, how to find out?
Well, I am pretty sure that it is not online, and that to get the index, you could probably contact the publisher. I am not aware of a compiled index for the entire set of volumes, but it's something that I certainly should look into, because that's an excellent question.
All right, and let's see, I know we have a number of questions here. Elaine is asking about German newspapers, specifically. She asks, what do you recommend to use for colonial times German newspapers? Are you aware of any German specific newspapers for the colonial period? And if you have anything else to say about newspapers, I know we didn't really get a chance to touch on that, but if you could answer her question, that'd be great.
There are German-specific newspapers from the colonial period. Many of them, unfortunately, are at libraries that it's hard to access them unless you go to the library. I'm sorry, they're with universities, libraries within universities, and you would need to go to the university to actually get access to the newspaper. Some I don't want to misspeak, but I seem to recall seeing German language newspapers at one of the larger compilers, not Genealogy Bank, but there is a group that has early American newspapers going back into the colonial period. So you may want to look for a specific colonial period compiler, and you might also want to contact some of the Pennsylvania universities, like University of Pennsylvania, or universities in the Pittsburgh area.
All right, and you mentioned that in the colonial period, there were only 3 counties in Pennsylvania. So Sharon's asking, so would Allegheny County records for that time period be recorded in Chester or another parent county?
Well, Allegheny County didn't exist for a very long time. I think Allegheny County was formed around 1780 something. If someone lived in the western part of the state, pre-revolution, you might want to look at Virginia records, because that land, if you go back to one of the earlier maps, the land purchase for western Pennsylvania wasn't until 1763, and the last purchase wasn't until 1783. So there was no governmental jurisdiction over that land. There was nobody to have records. If someone lived there, they were definitely flying under the radar, or their records would have been in Pennsylvania. Don't forget that the Native American presence in the western part of the state was quite strong up through the French and Indian Wars, and people were not, although they wanted to settle that area, they weren't rushing to settle it because it was quite dangerous.
And just going back to Renee's question about the Pennsylvania Magazine of History and Biography, Sandy has mentioned in the chat box that it is online, and there is an index online at JSTOR, which of course is a huge aggregator of periodicals and scholarly journals. So definitely check that out. the Historical Society of Pennsylvania has also published 2 indexes. The most recent name and subject index covers volumes 76 to 123, which is about 50 years from 1952 to 1999. So there are certainly indexes out there. You may need a membership to JSTOR. A lot of libraries may have that. Also, universities typically have a membership or a subscription to JSTOR as well. So that's a great resource. Thanks, Sandy, for including that. Let's see. Now, a few of you have asked about the URL for the subject guide that we've mentioned. I included that in my emails to you, and I'll also include that in my follow-up email to you. I know that there are a lot of questions still coming in. Unfortunately, that's the end of our time, but you can certainly, if you're interested, you can certainly consider scheduling a consultation with one of our researchers. You can write to consultations@nehgs.org. I know Anne provides consultations as well as a number of our genealogists on staff. If there's a really tough brick wall or you need help with your research or research done on your behalf, you can also consider hiring our research services team, which is research@nehgs.org. So as I mentioned, I will be sending you an email follow-up with a link to the subject guide as well as a link to a recording of this webinar. So if you missed anything, you didn't quite get a full reference, you can always go back and review the recording, and you can pause it, you can fast forward it, you can watch it on your own time, you can rewatch it. So I'll be sending an email with a link to that recording as well as the subject guide. But thank you all again for joining us today. As you leave the event, you will have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback. As we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings, any and all feedback is extremely helpful and appreciated. And if you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about upcoming online educational programs, please visit our online learning center at americanancestors.org/education. I hope to see you at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.
Was it the Pennsylvania Genealogical Society that had the